Welcome to the CNI 6 Weeks Curriculum Preview. We will spotlight the Better Learning Through Structured Teaching framework. The Gradual Release of Responsibility is a district-wide initiative for the 2015-16 school year.
This curriculum preview is interactive. For your learning, we've attached a note-taking sheet and a Gradual Release framework handout. Please ready the handouts at this time.
Learning, the goal of schooling, is a complex process. But what is learning? Consider the following definitions and the implications each has for teaching. Learning is a process of acquiring knowledge or skill through study, experience, or teaching. Learning is experience that brings about a relatively permanent change in behavior. Learning is a change in neural function as a consequence of experience. Learning is a cognitive process of acquiring skill or knowledge. Learning is an increase in the amount of response rules and concepts in the memory of an intelligent system. Which definition fits with your beliefs? Now ask yourself, how is it that you learn? Think of something that you do well. Take a minute to analyze this skill or behavior. How did you develop your prowess? How did you move from novice to expert? You probably did not develop a high level of skill from simply being told how to complete a task. Instead, you likely had models, feedback, peer support, and lots of practice. Over time, you developed your expertise. You may have extended that expertise further by sharing it with others. The model that explains this type of learning process is called the Gradual Release of Responsibility Instructional Framework.
If you're unfamiliar or unsure about Gradual Release, don't worry. All campuses will be trained in the Gradual Release model for the 2015-16 school year. This video is a precursor of the upcoming training, but please refer to it anytime as a reference for Gradual Release.
Resources used today are Better Learning Through Structured Teaching, first and second editions, and productive group work.
The learning targets today are that you will learn the rationale of using the Gradual Release of Responsibility and that you can understand the 4 components of Gradual Release in order to increase student achievement.
The Gradual Release of Responsibility Instructional Framework purposely shifts the cognitive load from teacher as model to joint responsibility of teacher and learner to independent practice and application by the learner. It allows for teachers who catch students who would otherwise slip through the cracks, such as that quiet, compliant student, and provides multiple opportunities for teachers to witness student understanding and intervene when needed.
The Gradual Release of Responsibility framework, originally developed for reading instruction, reflects the intersection of several theories, including Piaget's work on cognitive structures and schemata, Vygotsky's work on zones of proximal development, and Bandura's work on attention, retention, reproduction, and motivation, and Wood, Bruner, and Ross's work on scaffolded instruction. Taken together, these theories suggest that learning occurs through interactions with others. When these interactions are intentional, specific learning occurs.
Let's listen as Doug Fisher recounts a learning opportunity, the moment he knew the importance of gradual release.
We developed our implementation model of gradual release back in 2001. We were working on a district improvement process, and I kind of thought I understood gradual release responsibility, but I know the exact day where I really got it. My phone rang, and I went to get it, and the clip broke, and the cell phone fell down into the lagoon, and I decided I need to go get a new phone. So off I go to the store, and the kid that was selling me the phone kept upselling. Oh, this phone does this, this phone does this, and I'm thinking, I don't need that. I just need a phone. You open it, say hello, good to go. And he finally said to me, young people text message. And I had never text messaged ever in my life. And I said, I don't need a text message. He said, young people text message. And I decided that was a selling point right there. If all the kids in my school were going to be doing this, I better learn how to do it. So proud of that phone. I went back to the conference. Nancy, look what I bought. I got this super expensive phone. Had it in my pocket about an hour, 10 minutes later, and the phone rang. And I had no idea how to answer the telephone. Because every phone I'd ever had, open it, you could answer it. And this one just sat there vibrating away and said, missed call. It was very annoying. I went back to the store. See, what he did is he showed me how it worked. I saw it working in his hand, but it hadn't yet worked in mine. And it certainly hadn't worked in a collaborative situation. So he took it out, he showed me how it worked, and I said, you know, I need to see the phone in my own hand. I gotta touch it. So he puts the phone in my hand, and he starts coaching me through. Don't push this button, don't push the red button, unlock the screen. He did all this stuff. And Nancy got so wrapped up in the conversation, she bought a phone herself. And that night we had dinner, we sat across from each other, and started sending text messages and practicing, and the message back and forth. And send me a response, and do this. And I think about that a lot in my life as a teacher. I know there are things that I have taught my students, demonstrated, modeled, but I know that has to be in their hands, in their minds. And then they need some time in a fairly low-stress environment to practice with their peers before we hold them accountable individually.
There are 4 components of the Gradual Release Framework developed by Douglas Fisher and Nancy Fry. The first phase is focused instruction, an important part of the overall lesson design. Focused instruction is typically done with the whole class and usually lasts 15 minutes or less, long enough to clearly establish the purpose and ensure that students have a model from which to work.
The second phase is guided instruction and guided practice. Guided instruction is strategically using prompts, cues, and questions to lead students to new understanding. Over time and with cues, prompts, and questions, teachers can guide students to increasingly complex thinking. Guided instruction is, in part, about establishing high expectations and providing the support so that students can reach those expectations.
The third phase, collaborative learning, is allowing students to consolidate their understanding through exploration, problem solving, discussion, and thinking with their peers. Collaborative learning is not the time to introduce new information to students. This phase of instruction is a time for students to apply what they already know in novel situations or engage in a spiral review of previous knowledge. Collaborative learning is also a perfect opportunity for students to engage in accountable talk and argumentation. Collaborative learning situations help students think through key ideas, are a natural opportunity for inquiry, and promote engagement with the content. As such, they are critical to the successful implementation of the Gradual Release of Responsibility instructional framework.
The last phase is independent learning. The ultimate goal of instruction is that students be able to independently apply information, ideas, content, skills, and strategies in unique situations. Independent learning is requiring students to use the skills and knowledge they've acquired to create authentic products and ask new questions. When students are ready to apply skills and knowledge to produce new products, there's a range of independent tasks that might be used. The more authentic a task is, the more likely the student is to complete it.
Please ready your note-taking sheet at this time as Doug Fisher describes the key elements of the Gradual Release Framework.
So now we're going to talk about instruction. So I'm going to talk about them in an order. It doesn't matter which order we go in. I am concerned that people see our work. Nancy and I drew these in 2001. I think sometimes people see these and think we mean that you must always start with focus, then go guided, then go collaborative, then go independent. You can do them in any order that makes sense on a given day. You can imagine a class starting where it's independent learning first. The kids walk in, they do a journal entry, do now problem, must do, any of those kinds of right now independent work. You could imagine starting a class with collaborative learning. They have to learn something, they do something together. So you can start anywhere. I do believe that all 4 of these components must be present in every lesson every day for learning to occur. I don't think you can skip some on some days. I don't think you can say, well, today we're going to do these 2 and tomorrow we'll do the next 2. I think it creates a whole cycle of learning when you do all 4 of these things each day. So if you take your folds and you look at focused instruction or focused lesson, here's what I think about when I think of focused instruction, that aspect. Number 1, there's a purpose. Number 2, there's teacher modeling. So first, the purpose. I didn't say objective or learning target, although I could have. I said purpose because I want to make sure we also include relevance. So I say purpose rather than objective or learning target so that it reminds me to think about the relevance for the learner. The second part of focused instruction is about teacher modeling. Opening up your brain and modeling your thinking, how you solve problems, how you read, how you think about a process, any of those kinds of things, teacher modeling. For me, teacher modeling has, at the very minimum, 2 components. Number 1, it is I statements. It's not we statements, and it's not you statements. It's I statements. When I read this, I was thinking about. When I saw that problem, the first thing I thought of was, it's I statements. The second part of teacher modeling for me is about metacognition, thinking about our thinking. At the very minimum, we should have a because or why or how. I can make the following prediction, blah, 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 because the author told me X. So that's for me modeling. So we have a purpose to every lesson, objective, learning target, whatever, a purpose to every lesson, and we model our thinking. For those of you who are in science and things like, some of those more discovery inquiry fields, you don't like that to come first, right? You don't want to give away a lot of stuff up front. So do the modeling later. It doesn't have to start the lesson. But somewhere in a lesson, I believe that students need to hear some expert thinking from their teachers. Because hopefully, you know more than the majority of students in your class. They need to hear that thinking. So that's focused instruction, purpose and modeling. Guided instruction, one example of guided instruction is close reading. The other way to do it is to prompt and cue and question students. So for us, our definition of guided instruction is the strategic use of questions, prompts, and cues. I'll say that one more time. The strategic use of questions, prompts, and cues. This was a weakness I had as a teacher. I was pretty good at whole class instruction, modeling, setting my purpose, and I'm pretty good at getting groups of students to work collaboratively. And then if I noticed a group was struggling, I would go over to that group and I would re-explain to them what I just told the whole class. Do you hear that I'm doing all the work still? This was hard for me because I know how to listen to them, and when they struggle, I know how to take it back, take over, and give them more information. So I've had to learn to not do that, to not tell the students the information they're missing, but rather ask a question, prompt them, or cue them. It's a little slower, but it's the students doing the cognitive work. So I think there's 2 ways to do guided instruction if we're in that area. If the students are working in a group, you can, as a teacher, insert yourself into the group and switch it from group work to guided instruction because of your presence. Or you can take students out of different groups and pull them to you for a small group lesson, an extension, a remediation, something like that. So we have 2 ways of thinking about guided instruction in the small group format. You rotate around, or pulling kids from their groups and doing some instruction. So every day, teachers should be working on the errors and misconceptions that students have and trying not to just tell them something, but to prompt and cue them. I think that's fair, don't you? That'd be a reasonable part of school. Every day, we should have students doing collaborative learning. So if you could move to that part of your notes. And for me, collaborative learning is student-to-student interaction. They talk to each other. They interact. They interact in academic ways, with academic language. We have to get students producing the language for them to learn the language. That's the whole point of collaborative learning, is building academic language. But do your students speak the discipline of science, or the discipline of mathematics, or the discipline of history, or the discipline of art? If not, they need to apprentice to that. So we need more time in school with student-to-student interaction. The last one, independent learning. That's the application of the things we've been teaching students. If I could do this over, I would divide that into two halves. I think there's in-class independent learning and out-of-class independent learning. So this is my dream, my vision, my hope for what schools would look like. There's a purpose every day. The teachers model every day. Students have time to work together using academic language in the presence of their peers. Teachers notice errors and misconceptions, and they don't tell the kid the information. They use questions, prompts, and cues. And they hold students accountable for that information through a spiral review practice. It doesn't sound too hard, does it? Not a big, long list. Here's a list of things that we know work to change achievement.
To recap Doug Fisher's points, the gradual release model establishes a purpose for every lesson, provides for teacher modeling, provides for teacher use of questions, prompts, and cues to address misconceptions and aid struggling students, provides for student collaboration using academic language with peers, holds students accountable for cognition through spiral review of information.
Let's explore the gradual release instructional model with Sarah Wesley as she applies it in her class.
We're going to try to keep this pretty simple. I'm very passionate about the notion of meeting students right where they are, because who they are is wonderful and who they are is full of potential. A lot of the patterns that we've looked at so far have kind of been illustrations, right? I think that we can meet them where they are just in the way that we design our instruction. What goes right here? How do you as a reader react to the real story? The gradual release of responsibility is an instructional model that has been written about by Doug Fisher and Nancy Fry. The basic premise of the model is that the cognitive load of what we do in any teaching situation has to shift to the learner. All right, so this is what you're doing for tomorrow, okay? If I'm spending all of my time holding all the answers in my head, and I'm the one who's doing all of the work, then students on the other end of that are just being passive. And what we need to do is gradually, over time, give that responsibility of constructing the knowledge, of owning the knowledge to them. So the four components of the instructional model: the focus lesson, or the I do part. So I want you to choose a pattern. You can choose one of these. The guided instruction, which is where we do together. So what do you think this is?
So it goes back to like our whole reader response thing?
Yeah. The productive group work, which is where you do together.
He experiences an enormous amount of physical pain due to these injuries that he sustains.
And then the independent work, which kind of accumulates all of these different components when the student works alone. Try to write down what you think this means in your own words. What we really are teaching is we're really teaching students how to think. The first component of that requires a lot of explicit teaching. So I modeled my own thinking with this exercise. What do you think? Do you think his limbs are a pattern?
I don't think it's a pattern, I just think it could be a symbol. Right.
So today was the opportunity for students to choose their own patterns, to work collaboratively with each other in order to draw some analysis about those. In 5 or fewer words, I want you to put the big idea. And then probably also really important in that was at the very end, I gave each of them a sticky note. And on that, I'm going to ask you to tell me how your brain came up with that idea. So I think that's really crucial on two fronts. One, because in group work, it's so easy for one person to do all of the work. So at some level, they have to own their own learning in that productive group work model.
Anybody went to a window, it was just to get away from something or to feel better.
They also have to own their own metacognition in all of this. So they have to be able to talk about and describe how they think.
After he becomes a bug, everyone starts rejecting him for who he is. Ultimately, the abuse kills him. He just says, I'm just going to lay down and die.
So we decided that, like, every time that he feels some physical pain, it doesn't really bother him that much, but every time he feels anything emotional connected to his job or his family, it just devastates him.
These are new thinking skills for them, and they need to really become acclimated to thinking in this way before they can start to apply it to more difficult texts.
We put duty numbs, betrayal burns, and hunger festers.
Sounds like a poem. I think depending on where the teacher is at in his or her understanding of the model, it may not be more work, it's probably just different work. At its crux, to me, this model is about a learning process. It is not about ways of delivering content as much as it is about ways of getting students to become thinkers, getting students to become autonomous.
Books don't influence what you don't know, it's what you do know.
Okay, now explain that to us, because that's really interesting.
It's better to influence a reader by what he does know than what he doesn't know, because what he does know, you can build more fact off of that.
I wonder if productive group work is more comfortable to teachers.
It really has been one of the first district initiatives, so K-12 initiative, where everyone is working towards something common.
How do you get that motivation when it's not a choice?
Is it difficult to do this by yourself? Absolutely. Can you do it when you have others? Absolutely. Okay, keep going. Do we have to be willing to look for the little celebrations, the little moments that may really offer us insight into how we changed our practice? Yeah, we have to do all of those things, but it's all a part of the process of learning.
Ultimately, structured teaching requires that teachers know their students and content well, that they regularly assess students' understanding of the content, and that they purposely plan interrelated lessons that transfer the responsibility from the teacher to the student.
The practice that guides this type of teaching, the gradual release of responsibility, can also be conceptualized as shown in this figure, which highlights the framework's recursive structure and the ways in which teachers might vary its 4 instructional phases in order to optimize learning.
Let's revisit our learning targets. You should be able to say that you have learned the rationale of using the gradual release of responsibility framework, that you know it's research-based and it's how people learn, that you can understand the 4 components of the gradual release to increase student achievement.
Let's conclude with what students are saying about gradual release and their own learning, and ask yourself, is what I'm doing helping each student learn more?
He has a clarity of thought. He really knows what to model, how to model it. There's no muddiness with the expectations.
It does help us when he has us do it as a class, then do it together, then do it independently, because it's repeating, so it's easier to get in your head.
I mean, repetition works for me, and it is working for Cameron.
My favorite part is when we get to work together with other students, because it's like we help each other.
It helps us be more independent.
Cool, I like it.
We can do it without other people telling us what to do.
And the other thing that's good about this model is there's no surprises. It just provides a nice, clear outline and framework for a lesson.
First, he tells us what to do, and then we do it in a group, and then we do it on our own.
He gets into it and learns it, and have us learn it.
Cameron thinks Mr. Frazier is great. She loves him. She's definitely grown.
Thank you for your participation. We look forward to supporting and serving you in the gradual release implementation.
Thank you. Until next time, goodbye.